How's it going, folks? Welcome back to Idiots versus Idiots. I am the big man. With me, as always, is my wonderful friend from my brother from another mother, Mr. Danny. And as always, we talk business and marketplace news.
Yeah.
Yes, Danny? Yeah? Okay. Except when we agree or disagree on something, which, oh, by the way, and I meant to bring this up earlier, but I'm going to bring it up now before we get into our stories, as Danny likes to call them, of the day. I really appreciate how that we are both using our shared Twitter account of Idiots versus Idiots, at
Correct.
IVI, by the way. We both share this account
It's
to
not
make
at
fun
IVI.
of each other.
What are you talking about?
Idiots v Idiots. At Idiots v Idiots. Anyway,
Yes.
we use it as a shared account that
That's
we
correct.
use to make fun of each other, by the
That's
way.
right.
And I think everybody else enjoys it. I will take shots at Danny, obviously, on there. And Danny takes shots at me for no reason at all.
And if a layman or a person who doesn't understand that both of us are using the same account reads it, we just sound like a person who is in dire need of medical attention having an inner dialogue spewed onto Twitter.
Yeah,
Because-
there's one of us complaining constantly about the other.
Yeah.
But we both know that it's each other complaining about each other.
It's in one voice. So
It is, but I find it absolutely hilarious every time I come across a tweet that you wrote about me, and I'm sure you do when you come across a tweet I wrote about you, because we each know what the other one is talking about.
That's entirely true.
Anyway, so follow us at Idiots versus v Idiots. Yes.
On Twitter.
On
We're
Twitter.
Idiots versus Idiots on Facebook.
Yeah.
We're on LinkedIn now. Just because I feel like that's the most appropriate social network for our content.
Absolutely. And make sure that whether you're watching or listening to this, you hit the subscribe button as well.
If you don't, why are you being a jerk, man?
Yeah, why are you being it? Why you try to take away from small business, man?
That's
why
right.
you should feel crap about yourself.
Should feel really bad.
Yes.
We are minority and female owned.
Danny identifies as both of those things. So go ahead, Danny.
For the tax benefits, I'll be whatever you need me to be, my friend. Hey, speaking of tax benefits, the people over at the New York Stock Exchange are threatening that they might move to Dallas, presuming Dallas has electricity. This story is a week old.
Well, okay. So are they really threatening to move? I mean, this is really, what is this about? It's again, we're not a political show, but sometimes we have to talk about business in a taxation state way.
Well, no, I mean, listen, we're not a political show, but this is a reality of business and marketplace. It is taxes. And that encourages, listen, there is a throng of people moving to Puerto Rico now.
I know a couple of them.
I know you do.
Already live in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Because of the 4% flat tax rate that you pay there.
And it's an interesting strategy of like, and listen, I know people that are moving to Texas, and they moved to Texas with a job, with their existing job, and they're like, I just got a 30% raise.
Well,
right?
Sure. Cost of living and no state tax, right?
And between the two, and like people like myself, we might complain about the property taxes in Texas, but if you're coming off the East Coast, I mean, who cares?
Or
it's
West Coast.
Insignificant. Yeah, if it's insignificant, right? I came from the Midwest to Texas, and I was just like, going from 6 or 5 or 4% to 10 is like, what in the world? But it all balances out because it's warm and stuff sometimes.
But here's the actual story. The reason this is a story is because New York, obviously as a state and a city, has been ravaged by Dos Equis in the last 14 months. The city, the commercial, everything. As a state, they're looking at a massive loss as far as tax revenue year over year.
Yeah.
So what is one of the things that is obviously based in the state of New York, and that happens every single day, right?
Yeah.
So
5 days a week.
Right. So they've proposed initiating that, oh, by the way, was a thing up until like 1980 or 1981 when the state passed a rule saying that they were capping what they would do it. And essentially it's a transaction tax. The New York State wants to tax every transaction of the New York Stock Exchange, both big and small, at a microscopic rate, right? Microscopic.
Right.
And they want to do it to increase. And the New York Stock Exchange essentially is getting ahead of it by saying, hey, we can go somewhere else. We don't have to stay here in New York.
And let me just say this much to the wider dialogue about this is just like, the danger of introducing taxes to a group of people. We're going to talk about, we have another story too that's coming after this that is in the similar vein, but like when it's one thing to say, hey, we're a tourist industry and we have to be in Florida, right?
Sure.
It's another thing to say we're at this point, a lot of what happens in the stock market is virtual. A lot of the trading is done over computers. You don't need to be on a floor somewhere.
Everything's done by computers, even on the floor in today's world, right? I mean, everything is done.
So I'm saying that something is better than nothing. And unless you create a system in which people have to stay, like, California attempted to propose a tax where you can leave, but we get to tax you for 10 years after you leave.
Sure.
But the point is that people, it lacks creativity. It shows that this is just like,
okay, let's make it clear. Danny doesn't believe in taxes at all.
Of course
right?
I don't.
So Danny doesn't believe in taxes at all, but which I say Danny doesn't believe. I wholeheartedly believe in taxes as long as they're used for what they're supposed to be used for. But here's the point is, there's actually
you can believe in whatever utopian make-believe Santa Claus magic you want to believe
whatever
in.
You say.
Free country.
The point is there's a federal, actually, this has been looked into since the GameStop thing, right, and stuff like this. The federal government is looking to increase taxes as well, and they're looking at creative ways to do it. And there's actually a bill that has a very similar to what New York State is trying to impose, trying to do it on a national level, which then, again, the New York Stock Exchange wouldn't have a choice because they couldn't leverage the state. Now, will it actually pass? Who knows? But that would be one way. One of the reasons hedge funds, these big funds, get away with what they're doing is their transactions, large and small, are not taxed as long as they fall under certain umbrellas.
Yeah.
Even from a real estate investment standpoint, there's something called a 1031 exchange that you can do to essentially kick your taxes down the curb as long as you're not taking any money out.
Some of the larger funds will set it up to where they're like, yeah, we're just going to kick the taxes down the road until the guy who's organizing, the main shareholder, just croaks.
Which is never, right? They're kicking it down the curb till never, right?
Right. And then they just take a loan out, right? And then they create the liquidity through debt.
Right. Because they're never going to sell all their investment properties, which is what the 1031 exchange is for.
Here's the ultimate problem, right? The entrepreneur, the innovator, the businessman, right? Always one step ahead of the tax man. He's always one step ahead of the law.
By design.
They're always going to go, for instance, like we're talking about right now, well, if we make a tax here, we'll go somewhere else. Right? And Puerto Rico will go, hey, we're a U.S. territory. We can leverage that and tell people who live in the mainland and say, hey, if you relocate to Puerto Rico and export your business to the mainland or to another, then we don't charge you any taxes. Effectively, it's a couple points, right? And, if you're moving from California and you go from California to Puerto Rico, which the boxer and YouTuber Logan Paul says he's going to do now. It's absurd, and so that ability to move around creates a scenario where, hey, the New York Stock Exchange might go, oh, they're going to impose a federal tax on our transactions. We're based out of Turks and Caicos now, and so it's a situation where it's too little too late, right? And the lack of forethought and going, hey, we're going to, whatever happened at Dos Equis was one of those things where no one could have predicted these events taking place. And it created a groundswell of competition among states, which I think is ultimately healthy for you and I, the regular average multimillionaire Joe, So I'm talking about myself. Big man has a little ways to go on being a multimillionaire.
When we I own a company. I own parts of a bunch, but I own a company myself. And why did I set up that company? Is because that company, as far as the IRS, tax, and the United States government, is an entity. They treat it just like as a person.
It's a person, yeah.
It's a person, right? And there's benefits to doing that because they treat it like a person. And when you start doing that, and you create all of these loopholes and all of these big things, like you said, business is always ahead of the tax man. That's by design, right? Again, this is where it comes from simplified reforms to taxes that I'm a big fan of. You should simplify it. But
I mean, I used to be in that category of like, hey, if we just make this a one-page return, make it uncomplicated, lower rates without write-offs, and just say you can't write anything off, but the rate's going to a flat 10 or something like that.
Whatever the math would have to be.
Whatever the math is, it makes a lot of sense and the math works. But the point is, again, we're not a political show, but hey, business and politics intersect a lot. The average Joe, you and I, it's the tax is not written by us, right? The tax laws are not written by us. And the tax laws are written by the people who are benefiting the most from them. So,
well, and that's why New York will not pass this rule because Wall Street's in New York. There's going to be a lot of money pushed against it,
and there's already a kind of an exodus taking place to Miami. So there's a couple companies who are moving operations to Florida.
There's an exodus happening in New York, period. Because people they don't know. I've read several articles on this in the last 6 months. There are talks about New York City becoming the next Detroit. That people and businesses are exiting at such a rate that it just can't sustain itself.
Yeah, this is the first time in American history, I believe, or like in 50 years, where the rents went down in New York City, and the general vacancy rate of commercial, residential, and high rises is on the rise. It's going up. There's a lot of people who believe that's a good thing because that means the artists and the weirdos or whatever will move back to New York. And I did read an article recently like, hey, if you're a struggling starting off musician, don't move to Austin, move to New York. And I agree with that. Don't move to Austin. Don't move to Texas. Just don't do it.
Danny's saying that for selfish reasons, folks, not economic reasons. So,
that's correct.
Move to Austin if you want to. But
don't.
I hope
but if you do,
New York
call the big man.
Comes back stronger than it did in the past and stuff like that. But again, right now, it's not showing signs of that. Commercials.
Let me give you a statistic.
Yes.
In 1960, the wealthiest city in the world, big man, the entire globe, was this city called Detroit, Michigan. Right?
No doubt.
And it's a third world country. It's a third world city. I have family there. I used to go to the suburbs of Michigan every year, twice a year for holidays. For Christmas and then once in the summer. For Christmas or Thanksgiving and then one time in the summer. It's like I consider it my second hometown. Okay. More so than the place where I spent most of my life, okay? Which is St. Paul, the suburbs of St. Paul, Minnesota. I actually have because I'm a car guy and there's a certain grit that the city has. I almost went and worked there for Quicken Loans. I got hired at Quicken Loans and then didn't go to work there. Oops. And I still remember at the top of Quicken Tower, if you just look out at the city, that when the light hits that abject poverty in the right way, Something special about it. But
something magical.
yeah, but like, listen, the city of Detroit attempted to do the exact same kind of similar thing.
Yeah.
Where they're like, well, any business in the city of Detroit pays a 1% income tax. Well, guess what? If you head out to the suburbs of Detroit, like Troy, Michigan, you're going to see a phenomenon which is otherwise, like, to me, odd. High rises in the middle of a suburb. Like, down the street, like next to the highway, here's a couple of high rises. And then 2 blocks away is just big residential homes. Why? Because they're outside of city limits. So there is, there's an economist, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of different theories here. But and there was that article written by James Altucher. He's an interesting person. He has a podcast and basically saying that New York City might be super dead. And then Jerry Seinfeld, billionaire comedian's like, no, it's not. Like, yeah, because, you're not worried about it dying because you're in the Hamptons.
Well, but look, I don't look. I am all for. That's why I think it won't succeed at state level. If it does, it would be at a national level.
The ripple effect of that law passing and the New York Stock Exchange moving anywhere. It's not simply that, okay, who cares? A bunch of wealthy people are leaving the state. Boo-hoo. No. It is the push carts where people buy their lunch. It is the
you're
street
talking
vendors.
About Wall Street moving. That's what you're talking about. You're not talking about New York Stock Exchange moves to Dallas. That's electronic. But you're talking about people.
The people.
You're talking about people
the real
that
estate,
support people,
the
that
dump,
support people.
The dump effect of the real estate. It will not be, if this happens, which again, you're saying it doesn't. I'm saying it's inevitable. I'm not saying it's happening today. I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow. And I'm not saying they're going to Dallas. I'm saying the long-term result here is it's over for them, right?
I think, and this is a great lead into our next story. I think you're going to see a lot of what we consider brick and mortar. Okay, like Wall Street being a place, the New York Stock Exchange being a place. I think that is what is inevitable as far as going away. The New York Stock Exchange doesn't necessarily, even in today's world, 2020, it's February 2021,
right?
Doesn't necessarily have to be anywhere.
Right, that's so true.
We already have that technology, right?
Of course.
And which leads into the next story, which is what, Danny?
Well, hey, before we get into that, I want to talk about our sponsor. I'm sure you did not know this, but over here at Idiots versus Idiots, we are death peddlers. That's right. Woo! We peddle the death of plastic pollution. Not only does Liquid Death murder your thirst, 10% of every can sold goes to end plastic pollution, and it is a superior water delivery system. Use code IDIOTS10. It is flashing at the bottom of your screen at liquiddeath.com for 10% off today. And very quick personal testimonial. I drink so much more water because it's in a can. For some reason, it's just how it is. But our next story, as the big man alluded to, is that Salesforce is effectively killing the 9-to-5 at Salesforce.
Well, I think they're making an argument to not just kill it at Salesforce. I think they're trying to make the argument to kill it, period. Now, I told Danny when he wanted to do this story that there is good and, let's call it, nefarious reasons, I think, that you're doing this. Sure. As not just Salesforce, but as companies, because the way they went about, even the article, if you really read it, and again, I'm not normally a pessimistic or a worst case scenario guy, but the way they even layered this article... That's
news to me.
I'll get out of here. The way they pushed this article is like, okay, we're going to have different kinds of workspaces, meaning you're working at home all the time, you're partially coming into the office 2 or 3 days a week, and then they talk about redoing their workspaces, which... Here's what I heard when I read the article. Now, again, my opinion, but here's what I heard. What I heard is, okay, I want you to stay home. If you're coming into the office, I want it to be little by little, and I'm going to take our existing workspace, which is mostly a bunch of cubicles in these big open areas, and I'm going to turn it into co-working space where I'm going to allow other companies to use the space that you are no longer using. So I'm going to maximize my commercial profits, which I wouldn't be surprised if all companies do this to a certain extent, right? Especially ones that are stuck in these 20-year leases and stuff like that. Turn everything into co-working space and then sublease it out to other companies, right? For unused storage space. And I don't want you to come back. Now, here's where I say I think it gets a little nefarious. What we've seen in 2020 is a research...
That's a $5 word for a fellow like you.
Get the hell out of here. Here's the point. What came out in 2020, research showed statistically that people that are working from home, remote workers, accomplish 35 to 40% more working from home than the people that stayed in the office, right?
And I can tell you that it creates a scenario where you don't have a day where it has, blocks of time where you're going to the office. It just creates, you wake up in the morning and now you're working all day, right?
That's what I'm talking about. When you go to work and you work 9 to 5, most people, right, when they leave work, their work stays at work, right?
That's right.
They don't bring it home, even if their mind's still thinking about it. If I'm working on an assembly line, once I leave, I can't build any more widgets or whatever it is.
You can't bring it with you.
In this way, people are accomplishing more for the same amount of money, right? They're accomplishing more. And why? I guarantee if you were really to dig into that stats, is because they're working more. I guarantee you they're working more than their 40 hours a week because it's right there. How do people's brains work? We all work on this very similar mentality of accomplishment, right? If I'm in the middle of a project, I want to finish it. If I'm in the middle of something, I want to finish it. And you add that mentality to now your work is at home with you 24/7.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm working on it at 2 o'clock in the morning because that's when I'm awake, but I keep working on it. How many hours did these people that accomplished 35, 40% more, how many hours did they put in?
That's a good question. But I also do think this. I think there is something to be said about I'm comfortable. I'm wearing pajama pants. I do think that adds to workflow. I do think you accomplish more when you're comfortable and there isn't pressure. Listen, nobody wants to sit on these Zoom meetings, right? And so Death by Meeting is a book. You can read it. I think meetings are so inconsequential in what they achieve.
Oh, yeah. Right? No, they're wasted. They're so people, middle management gets paid for something.
Exactly. So when at the beginning of Dos Equis in 2020, your internet best friend over here, Danny, was let go from a huge company. And that was fine. It all worked out for Danny. But one thing, because I had gone from working from home by myself, for myself, to working at a large corporation. This is a large global corporation. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I noticed was all of these meetings would populate in my schedule, and I would spend an inordinate amount of time. I was a senior project manager. It was a fun gig. And the volume of time I wasted explaining to people what I was doing and why I did it and justifying my process was unbelievable. I was like, the point was the end user, the customer, got a product delivered to them. They were happy. Done. And they paid us.
Right.
Right? Even though that's an accounts receivable problem, they paid. They're happy. I did my job. Mm-hmm. Right? But you didn't log the blah 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 blah. Oh, jeez,
middle management. Middle management calls these meetings.
I spent 2 hours a day logging what I was doing the other hours of the day. No, I'm not kidding.
Again, this is when I've argued this for years and decades. This is when companies become what I call bloated, right? When you're paying people to keep track
Kinda
of
like your
people
face?
that are people, hey, shut your face. You're just as bloated as I am, my round friend.
It's
Okay,
actually true.
but but they become bloated when you're paying somebody to do nothing but micromanage somebody else. You're paying two people to do one job, right? And these middle management can kill a company with this kind of BS. These unneeded, uneducated. And guess what? There are entire books written on this micromanagement stuff, right? About checking in with your people 15 times a day and giving them smaller projects so that you have an excuse to talk to them more often. And this is actually during that same study I was just talking about, that the reasons they asked the people, okay, you accomplished 35-40% more. Why do you think that is?
Right.
And the list is fewer interruptions, more focus time, quieter work environment, more comfortable, like you said, right?
Yeah.
And not being involved in office politics.
Yes. So let me also just add in this other thing here. I'm a ridiculous person. That's just who I am. I'm not going to try to be something else.
That is the understatement of the year, folks.
Yeah. And like I had to keep, and I have no problem not being political, but I have feelings in that regard. And it was an election year, and it was really unsettling to me knowing that everyone else in this office, this huge office, openly displaying a single political view with no consequence. But if I said something along the line, well, taxation is theft, and all gun laws are infringements and unconstitutional, anti-human, that would be a problem. But it didn't stop. But listen, I love doing the job. But my God, the interruptions and the talking, and then someone's trying to get a promotion and they want to talk to you about it.
Yeah. Well, not just the
Absurd waste of time.
But office politics, right?
That's right.
Every office I have ever worked, and look, I haven't worked in an office in more than a decade, but the point is,
they don't got a chair big enough.
They are still the same. It doesn't matter whether you walk into one 30 years ago or today. The office politics of cliques and people taking breaks together and this kind of stuff.
Let me tell you changes. Which was an odd thing for me was the place where I went to go work was a sorority. Like it was ladies from wall to wall, and all the guys were in the IT department. And when I first got there, they're like, "Oh, hey, you're upstairs, IT, right?" I'm like, "No, project management. I work for this." They're like, "I'm on the web dev team." They're like,
"Was it because you were a guy, Danny?"
It could have been. Yeah, you're right. That's fair.
Go ahead.
I said, no, but they try to shove me into the web development sector of the office. I was like, no, project management. No, it's just what's interesting to me is what happens after a company like Salesforce and subsequently other companies.
Everybody
say the 9 to 5 is dead. Here's what happens after that. And this has nothing to do necessarily with Dos Equis, but this is I've said this on the show before. Like we were moseying towards this result anyway, but now we're going at it at the speed of light, which is there's no such thing as an American company or an American job anymore. There's just a company that has a job, and there is a global marketplace where people who do certain kinds of work are competing. And if you're a smart person living in India or the Philippines or China, and you have the wherewithal to do certain kinds of programming where the language, it's a programming language. So English, Mandarin, Tamil doesn't matter. It's going
Delphi is Delphi, whether you're in China or whether you're in, United States. But that's my other point. That's my point about the bad side.
And here's the other thing. That company that I went to work for hired me, not because of my bachelor's degree, okay, which took me 13 years to get. So, just think of it as a stab in the heart of a racial stereotype. They hired me because of my specific expertise in managing overseas teams, right? At no point in time in the interview did they ever ask how big the team was that I've managed. It was 2 people. But I managed an overseas team. That's the point. And they had a huge company that they had contracted with overseas, and I liaised all day with that's it. So, and then sat in meetings explaining why I emailed somebody over there instead of going to the specific person, emailing them to email that person. Yeah.
The big companies for years have figured out how do I outsource. We call it outsourcing, right? Which I've never completely understood that term except for outside of the United States. But the point is how do I get my company dollar at the end of the month less, and employee cost is the biggest chunk, right? Employee cost and employee training is the biggest cost to every company.
Human capital.
Right, exactly. So how do I lower that cost? And the only way to lower that cost is to pay people less. But I need the production to continue at the same rate or higher, right? And pay people less. And in this kind of environment, like you said, if I need an engineer, if I need a programmer, if I need whatever, and I now have gotten rid of my geographic need, meaning my company lives in Austin, Texas, and I can hire anybody in the world that has those skills.
Right.
I'm not going to jump to that. Like Salesforce isn't just going to jump to that, but they're going to get there, right? In 5 years and 6 years. And then all of a sudden, you right here as a, let's just say engineer, right? In Austin, Texas, you're not just competing against Austin, Texas engineers. You're not just competing against Texas engineers. You're competing against worldwide engineers.
The global engineering. Yeah. And I'll say this much as somebody who's outsourced a lot of work before. In my marketing business, I honestly like rather working with foreign staff because they're happy to do the work. They're happy to work. I mean, I would pay them what they asked for. I had a client.
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a client once that was upset by the notion that I would hire someone in another country versus hiring an American. And I said, fine. I'll hire an American because I know somebody who can do the graphic design work. Mm-hmm. The price just went up by 10x.
Right.
And so she's like, well, I don't understand why you can't just pay this other person in the Philippines. I'm like, listen, the guy in the Philippines asked for $4 an hour. I gave him $4.50. It's what he asked for and then some. And I tipped him $50 on the back end. Okay? That's what he asked. So we're coming to a place where, as we talked about last week, satellite internet, because that is something that I still deal with a lot. Is, hey, my internet, I don't have the speeds to deal with this, or I can't upload something, or I pay per gig, right? I pay per gig to upload. So, if I send you a 10 or 30 gig file, a video file to edit, they're charging extra. But I'm saying we're coming rapidly to a place where, listen, let me give you an example of, I didn't bring this up in the Starlink story last week, but the more wireless things become, right now I have a grandmother that lives in India. If you call her on a phone, on a wired telephone, you can't hear anything. But if we just give the neighbor girl a call and say, hey, walk across the street, we can video chat with her in HD. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So the wireless, these countries, third world countries, emerging markets, they don't have infrastructure, but the infrastructure is becoming less infrastructure, and it's becoming more just drop a satellite down on a roof somewhere.
Access to inexpensive technology, right? If you had satellite access in any third world country, all you would have to do is give them inexpensive laptops, Chromebooks, and cell phones and whatever. And
not Chromebooks, but
I'm just saying that is the infrastructure of today's world. It's not laying down electrical lines. It's not. It's a different type of infrastructure.
And the other thing too is these countries are so hungry for those companies to show up. They will make, because it's not the same thing as manufacturing sneakers. Okay,
there's an entire workforce out there that would break their backs in a matter of months to learn something that you want them to do at the best of their abilities, right? Programming, engineering,
and let's
whatever.
even say that you're going to lose 10% of the quality of the work, but you're going to cut the price
80%?
by 60, 80%. That's what I always.
Well,
I tell clients all the time. We're going to do 85% of what the big companies will do for you. We're going to do 85% of it. and we're going to do it at a tenth of the cost.
Yes.
And then I proceed to charge them half of the cost, but that's just how it goes sometimes.
Well, and look, there was an article 5 or 6 years ago. It made it to national news, and I don't really know why. Probably because of the size of the company it was at. But this company, and this is most rules that are created by companies, especially the resistance to workforces working from home, is always by fear, right? It's always by fear. Like, they're afraid that the work is going to diminish, or that they're not going to get as much done, or there's not as much accountability. It's always run by fear. And in this case, their fear was justified, but the guy was hired. I know
the story you're talking about.
Yeah, some kind of crazy 6-figure salary.
He turned around and hired some guy.
Yeah, turned around and hired some guy in a foreign country to do it at 10-20% of what he was making. And the guy set it up where he sent it to him, and he sent it to his supervisors for his daily things. And the only reason he got caught is because he forgot to take the other guy's name off of it on one of the daily reports that he sent to his boss.
Yeah.
He forgot, he was forwarding the information and forgot to change the signature or something, is the only reason he got caught. They were happy with the work. They were happy with what's going down, right? But the guy wasn't doing the work.
I think if it's the same story that you and I are thinking of, he had actually 3 or 4 jobs.
I have no doubt. It wouldn't surprise me. I don't remember specifically.
He had one at Intel, he had one at Intel, one at Verizon, one somewhere else. And one of the companies actually caught him only because they noticed that there was a login from a VPN to their VPN from a foreign country. That was it.
So it wouldn't surprise me. Look, it's surprising to me that this is not a common story.
Right.
But that's their fear, right? Their fear is
all that happened was there was already a fire, right? Dos Equis dumped gasoline on it. And when management goes, hey, wait a second, these companies aren't going to dump middle management tomorrow. That's not happening, right?
No.
They're not going like Zappos did, holocratic, where it's a very flat organization. They're not doing that. They're going to keep their pyramid scheme going. Middle management went, hey, no one's asking me any questions. I don't have to bother these people. I'm going to keep getting paid. Of course, yes, we want everyone to work from home now. I mean, I think...
You may be talking... We're talking about the death of 9 to 5. What you actually may be talking here is the death of middle management.
It's true.
That's more significant. I mean, think about that. I mean, death to 9 to 5. You always need employees to do what employees do, right?
Right.
If you're a marketing company, you need people to do marketing, whatever. But in a world where we're all working from home, or we're all being, you know what I mean? Hey, send in your reports once a week about your workflow and blah blah blah. Do you need 15 middle management positions?
No.
Do you need a store manager, a regional manager, an area manager, a blah, blah, blah? Do you need these middle management positions that, oh, by the way, cost the companies a crap ton and are one of their biggest liabilities?
Yeah. I wonder if they keep the titles, they lower the salaries, and they just add it on to, okay, yeah, you're going to work from home, but we just need you to check on some, I think that could be a potential.
I need you to be a team leader, right? I need you to be a team leader. Retail's been doing that, like pushing that down for a long time now. I need you to be a team leader. But if I was middle management, I would be frightened by this trend, because again, why do I need you to look after 5 people when they're doing their jobs?
Totally.
Right? I think they're the ones at risk, this kind of stuff. But that's just my opinion on this. I think this is not a 9 to 5 is dead in the future. I think it's dead now. I think it's a dead man walking, so to speak.
Of course.
Right? And it's just being held up by people doing what they've always done.
And I went to that corporate gig just to see if I would like it. And I liked the job, but I hated everything. I liked the actual work, but I hated all the nonsense that went along with a corporate gig.
No, I always felt that way in a workplace. I knew it took me forever to figure out that me getting in trouble, and I was always the best at whatever job I held. Me getting in trouble, I know now, but I didn't know then. Yeah. Me getting in trouble back then is because I didn't fit into the employee box. I was an entrepreneur. I was a different way of thinker, and that caused problems.
I thought you meant like...
No, size. No, but so then I used to feel bad because I didn't fit in that box. I did.
Right.
I really, because I always wanted to do, very prideful person, right? I always wanted to do the best I could for the people I was doing it for and with.
Right.
But I figured out I didn't fit in that box.
Right.
You know what I mean? Maybe in today's world I would, because like you said, you don't no longer have to deal with a lot of the junk that you did having to go into the office every day.
Right. Well,
anyway,
before we get into the next story, I think you wanted to tell us about something.
I think today, are we talking about big man gear? Is that what you said? One of my favorites topics, actually. Yeah. Big man gear. Bigmangear.com is a, what do I call it? A brand, Danny? Is that what I call it? A brand. It's basically a t-shirt design company. So far with t-shirts, we're going to, what do you want me to say, Danny? Just go ahead and say what you want me to say.
No, it's your ad read. You do it.
He's such an ass, folks. Just so you know, he's always an ass. I don't have up the copy that he wants me to read. That's
Big Man Gear is the big man's idea of a funny merchandise brand. It's every corny dad joke and boomer meme on a t-shirt.
Not a boomer.
I know. For sale on Amazon Prime currently, you can buy the unapproved Idiots versus Idiots logo that I hate, because it's the unapproved logo. Because I am 100% in charge of branding and marketing, even though I don't get to do anything I want to do. It's title and name only. Let's talk about the Marks.
Yes.
Marks, plural, because we're talking about Marks the Cuban and Marks Zuckerstads of the Facebooks.
Danny likes to butcher everybody's names.
On purpose. Zuckerman. Sorry, I'll say it correctly.
It's on purpose. He's doing it on purpose, but he likes to do it. It's just a weird thing that he likes to do for no apparent reason. But go ahead.
So both of these guys are starting Clubhouse competitors. And in our in-depth research and investigation, the big man revealed it appears as though they're starting separate companies in the exact same space to compete with Clubhouse of the same name.
Yes. How does two companies start with, because all projects get a project name, right?
That's right.
And both projects are called Fireside.
And as the big man did the research, it appears to like they are separate projects, right?
Yes. And look, I went to article after article, and I told Danny about this before we started, and Googled different things just to make sure that it wasn't, because sometimes when some news article makes a mistake, it gets filtered out to a bunch of other news articles because they all write about what the other one, there's only one original source, and then they write 15 articles about it, whatever. But everything I brought up from both different companies said the term Fireside. So, is it a strange coincidence world? Are these two people actually working on the same project? Danny and I don't think that they're both working on the same project.
No, we don't.
Because they obviously, the Mark Cuban article is or all of the articles, he's got certain partners he's working with on this.
Right.
They're calling it they're not even calling it a Clubhouse competitor. They're calling it the next generation podcast platform, right?
Oh.
And their take on it is that and I'm going to quote here, facilitates live conversations in a paid per live audience format. I think the Mark Cuban idea is more like, there was a couple of episodes back we talked about a new platform, I forget the name of it, that we thought was more like a conference. They were trying to get into the conference space. Remember, more
StreamYard.
Yes.
Hopping in StreamYard.
It sounds like to me that instead of a Clubhouse thing, they're kind of taking the Clubhouse idea and make it more of a conference kind of thing. Where, okay, Mark Cuban is going to talk in real time with 100 people that pay $1,000 a pop. And it is live conversation like Clubhouse. But because that's the knock on both of these is...
all these articles are referring to it as a competitor to Clubhouse, because Clubhouse is released as a stripped down, invitation only. Yeah. But if you look at the result, it's we were just talking about how a real estate investor, a popular one that we're aware of, just made a deal with a company and they talked about it on Clubhouse, right?
Yes. I'm
So
seeing
I
it
think,
more and more from news outlets, from celebrities, from all these people that you see
yeah,
when a lot of people that you don't see. I
right.
don't know anybody personally that knows anything about Clubhouse. So they haven't heard of it, so
You
they're
know the
definitely not
CEO of
on it.
that company, don't you?
Well, no. Other than that, I'm talking about
Yeah.
normal, everyday, average Joes,
Right, right,
right?
right.
Most of them don't know what Clubhouse is, and even the ones that aren't on it, right?
Right.
So that being the case, it's still very exclusive. But I'm hearing it more and more from people like radio talk shows
Right.
and YouTube channels and stuff like that. These people that are getting access to it, but it's not your average everyday Joe. But they're talking about how popular it is. Here's two parts of this and we already started one of them. I'm going to read this because it's a quote. It says, "Today we say goodbye to current media platform limitations created by one-way conversations, a lack of interactivity, and non-existent analytics." Three things that it said there that are important, right? One of them is one-way conversations, which it's right. Twitter, Facebook, all of these, you make a statement, and even though somebody else can make another statement, you're not having a conversation,
But
right?
let me put it to you this way: a lot of websites got rid of their comment section, right?
Right.
And I'm curious to know at scale. Clubhouse doesn't have any sort of scale that matters, and I don't know with when what's interesting I think is the social media landscape has not had any sort of an injection of creativity in so long that when something comes along that's just slightly different, like a Clubhouse, and they're being extremely protective of their growth, everyone goes, "Hey, we can knock that off." Right? Twitter's knocking it off. Facebook's, with Mark Zucker's been
Well,
um
and Facebook has an entire track record of just ripping off somebody else's idea because they have the money to do it.
inspired
Right?
inspired by they're
I'm
inspired
sorry.
by.
I'm sorry. Cloning popular products, right? And purchasing its rivals is the technical term. But the point is they have the money to throw at a team to
Yeah.
build a Clubhouse type of app at any given time,
And
right?
they already have a
And,
user base to push
and
it
they have
to.
a user base to push it out to, so they can try to get on any trend. And now again, I think though subconsciously when we write marketing and stuff like that, we have a tendency that quote I just read you, when
Yeah.
we make, okay, here's the three things we're trying to accomplish, subconsciously we put the one that's really important last. And what's the last one on here? The last one on here says, and non-existent analytics. They want platforms that they're control. Again, what do all social media platforms about? They're about data
Selling your
collection.
data.
That's right. Right now, Twitter doesn't gain a whole bunch of data from you, right? They do certain things. What do they get by Clubhouse? I guarantee a Clubhouse is recording every single word said on its platform back and forth about anybody and everybody that talks in those conversations. You and I tried out this past week. We haven't gotten into it, or at least I haven't. What was it?
Stereo.
Stereo, right? Which sounds to me a lot like Clubhouse, right?
Here's the thing. Again, we don't know what Clubhouse is like because it's discriminatory and hateful policies of not having an Android app.
An Android app. And I'm sure it'll get there, but I would assume that the stereo or radio, whatever it is
Stereo.
stereo is very similar, but I haven't delved into it. I know that it's very interactive, right? And it's all live talk and that kind of stuff. I'm actually looking forward to getting more into that. But I think that this is an example, a big example of how big companies, Mark Cuban, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, are jumping on big trends because they just have the money to create it out of thin air in a very short period of time.
Because we talked about last week about Mark Cuban. He got into the drug business,
Yeah,
these
drug business,
prescription
yeah.
drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, because he
And
can, right? He's got the
yeah.
money to shove into creating a warehouse where they can make medicines, right? Or whatever. He's got the money to do it. He's got the
Yeah.
backers to do it.
And there's an
Go ahead.
entire movement right now to try and get Elon Musk to buy Twitter or start a social media company.
Well, again, why wouldn't they, right? It all makes sense, right? All of these companies continue to buy. And look, I think you're going to see more of this in the future instead of companies. Look, there's always two ways for a company to expand, and that's to create new or to buy someone that already does it, right?
Right.
I go out and we talked about last week, and we've talked about this before. I don't know where these evaluations come from sometimes when these companies get bought by big companies, but here's the point.
Valuation. Value. You said evaluation.
I don't care.
I
The
know
point
you
is, you know what I meant, and that's all that matters.
And everyone else did too, but I just wanted to point it out because I'm smarter than you. That's all.
Anyway, the point is I don't know where they get the evaluations. Is it less expensive for some bean counter that works at Facebook to go, hey, boss, Mark, hey, dude, why should we pay $1 billion for this jackwagon over here that hasn't figured it out when you have an entire team, a building of programmers that can look at that app and build it for you in 60 days, and it will cost you $2 million instead of $1 billion.
Totally.
Right? I think the only thing that benefit of acquiring, especially in this kind of social media app world, the only benefit is you also get their current users. I think that's what they're buying, right?
Sure.
So if Clubhouse gets bought, right, by somebody before it gets too incredibly big, right, before it gets to 100 million users or something, then they're acquiring not the technology of the app. They're acquiring the people that currently use it. That's what that's what they want. They want the users.
The same thing like when we talked about Uber acquiring Drizzly, they were just acquiring
the customers, the customer base. Who are the alcoholics in the area that we want to now deliver alcohol to? I think that's what and look, we keep talking about audience on this show. It's a reoccurring theme. If you have the ability to build an audience, that in itself, if you want to ultimately be bought by someone, if you want to be, bought out, if you want to have something that you can sell to someone else, it's an audience. Right. That's really what any business, podcast, or anybody else is.
Totally. Well, with all that being said, it's now time to talk about the most important sponsor of the show, Riselentless. That's Riselentless. Rolls right up the tongue. Riselentless. Never stop rising. It is my coffee mug company for entrepreneurs, side hustlers, and everyone who dares to dream big.
I gotta say that Danny has risen his Riselentless game in the last week. All right,
you think so?
Added some cups on there. Yep. That are extraordinary. I like them a lot.
We have a dozen mugs on there now.
You have a dozen mugs on there now?
We got a dozen mugs on there now. I'm gonna add stickers pretty soon.
And the Riselentless mug itself, the Phoenix rising from the ashes. That's one of my favorite in all of them. But so you should definitely go check it out. He has definitely upped his game, probably because I gave him a hard time last week. Yeah. I'm just taking credit for his hard work. That's all it is.
Okay. Getting Big Man to be complimentary is a nearly, it's like trying to get the water turned on in Central Texas right now. Ain't happening, folks. But this last one's a fun story, and the Big Man sent it to me, and he's usually not allowed to do that.
Yeah,
But the first 3D printed house, I think in the United States, is going up for sale.
No, it's the first three. As usual, Danny gets it half right because his research is lacking. It's the first house that actually gets what's called in the business the construction world a certificate of occupancy, right? So the first 3D printed house in the United States, that first permitted 3D house built in the United was actually built in Austin by a company called Icon in 2018. Right. However, nobody lives in that house, right? It was a house built as hey, we can do this. Does that make sense? And it was permitted, but this is the first one that's actually made it to, hey, we've met all the building codes. That's what a certificate of occupancy means, right? It meets all the building codes. Somebody can live in this house. Right. Now, this is
New York, even though it's New York State, that's a pretty stringent,
Absolutely.
Their building codes are not a joke there, it's cold climate.
Well, it's a 1,400 square foot house, 1,400 square foot, 2.5 car garage.
You know what they
It's
call that in New York, right?
what's that?
A mansion.
Yeah, probably. And down here in Texas, that's tiny. But look, it all comes down. This is technology has been around for a little over a
Right.
decade now. They've been working on it for 30 years, right? On small scales 3D printing, right? And there's a future of 3D printing in a lot of different, from medical all the way to construction and stuff like this. What they're really working toward in this case, this company's take on it is automation, right?
Right.
That they've built a machine that built this house, not a whole bunch of other stuff. And they're working out, like always, how do we build the house in this way and still get the plumbing right and still get, you know what I mean, electricity right and all that. Building the shape of a house and the walls of a house is simple, right? That's
Right.
not a hard thing. Most of these are all made out of concrete, right, or
Yep.
some form of concrete. There's actually another company that I read about years ago that before this 3D printing process come about. It's what's it called? It's called insulated concrete blocks, where
Yeah.
essentially they're like styrofoam blocks made out of concrete, and they look like Legos. And you
Right.
can put together a house, or at least a small house out in the middle of nowhere, in like a day, right?
Right.
And they're already
And
insulated. You don't need extra insulation,
right.
all of that kind of stuff.
And this is to say, like when we say 3D printed, right? It conjures up this notion of like, but basically all it did was multiple layers of concrete,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a machine, and it just layers the concrete until the house is up.
Exactly.
And I think that it's a good thing, and it's going to disrupt an industry that is it is due for some disruption, right? If
I,
I'm being perfectly kind,
I hope so, because here's the as we were talking about on the New York Stock Exchange story on this
Right.
podcast, is when you get into regulation and allowing
Yep.
and stuff like this, the hurdle is right now, because here's the promotion of 3D printing houses. 50% cheaper,
Yeah.
okay, less than 10% of the time. So if it takes an average of 6 months to build a house, this takes like a couple of weeks and it's
Right.
done, right?
Yeah.
So less time, 50% less cost, right?
Right.
This house is for sale for $300,000 in Riverdale, New York, right?
Right.
So there's plenty of profit margin, and you can charge a lot less for the house. Really, you're buying the land, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But if I take how we traditionally build a house in a given area,
Yeah.
how many people does it normally take? Right now, you need a concrete. You got slab people that come in.
Yeah.
You have framers that come in. You have sheetrockers that come in. Right.
Totally.
And so, any government that's looking at this, hey, we're gonna let you build concrete houses in this area,
Right.
they're gonna get some pushback from existing builders. Going,
Right.
that means we got to lay off 90% of our staff. If the only people that have to come in is come take a day to put this robot
Yeah.
and then move it to the next lot, and then move it to the next lot, and move it to the next lot, how many people are you putting out of work? That's always going to be the right.
I hear what you're saying, but the long term ramification, yeah, it's less people working, but housing is always a shortage. We always need more housing. So I think the benefits will outweigh the consequences of labor, of the labor consequences. I think the benefit to the market will outweigh that.
I agree, and usually that wins out. But I will tell you this. I think before you see this used on a national scale to build houses, before you get these, I looked it up, and there's only like 12 or 14 global companies that are really trying to push this housing 3D printing market.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
And I think before it's really embraced, I think you're going to see much smaller scale projects. Something like Austin. The reason Austin let that house being built in 2018 is obviously here in Austin is one of the parts of the country that has a huge homeless population, right?
That's right.
Thing. And if the government can get away with letting them 3D print 600 square foot houses, which, oh, by the way, up until this one being 1,400 square, most of these that have been built anywhere in the world are 600,
Small.
700, 800 square foot, right? If the city of Austin can get some strange strange contract by one of these 3D builders to build 50 600 square foot homes on the cheap.
There's that land out in East Austin. I think it's 20 or 30 acres or something like that.
Yeah, and if they can build 600 square foot homes for the homeless, and it's not in somebody's backyard, and it costs them, 10% of what it would normally cost to build these houses, I think you're going to see projects like that are more government or state or city projects.
I think that, in more rural areas, other countries, I think this will become popular. I also do think in 15 years' time, where the technology gets smaller, it gets way more affordable to buy these things up. I think you're going to see people tear down old homes, because it's now going to be cheaper to just tear down an old house. Like if you go off of South Congress right now in Austin, Texas, there is this. It's so fascinating. Tiny little old house, $1 million house.
Yes.
Right? Fancy $1 million house. Tiny little shack, $2 million. It's this weird thing. I think you're going to see more of that. And I think you're going to see people tear down old houses because they simply cannot compete with the efficiency too that this offers, the energy efficiency of something like this. Right? How it's going to move air better.
Well, and here's the other part of that is most people buy homes with lending the money. Right?
With
Lenders
mortgages?
I guarantee you right now, mortgage isn't going to give you any money for this home, right?
You
the
think
person
so?
that buys this home is going to buy it cash.
You
because,
think so?
Look, lenders like stability. And if I come to you and say, hey, this home was built by a 3D printer, right, and whatever, nobody knows the longevity of that. Nobody knows the stability of that. So it's
built with a 3D printer, but it's concrete. Right.
Again, you're talking about something that's not normal. It's not mainstream. And when you're talking about using someone else's money to do something for you, anything outside of the box, outside of the norm, is higher risk. They consider it higher risk.
Fair enough.
Can you find lender like trailer homes have been around forever? Most lenders don't lend on trailer homes, right?
That's so true.
They've been around forever. So I think so. Then you talk about obviously,
manufactured homes are very tough to get traditional mortgages on.
Right, absolutely. So then you add that. So, and look, you and I know the way the market works. Somebody out there will loan people money for these things if it was to get on, right? There'll be a whole new market of lenders specifically for 3D printed homes.
They'll, a company will, one of these fintech companies will be like, hey, we're going to specialize in 3D printed home financing.
Sure. But that's
and
just
then
another
a big
hurdle.
bank. Yeah, and then a big bank will come along and buy them eventually.
Because look, if I could get a 3,000 square foot home, if I can go out, like again in the next couple of years, let's say this company or any other company, if I can buy a lot out on the lake in the middle of nowhere in Texas, right, a lakefront, and have this company come out and build me a 2,000 square foot 4-bedroom, right on the lake, and do it at 20% of the cost. Hey, I'm all for it if it can happen. But I think that's the first step they're going to take. There's no way in the current system they would be able to go out like a developer does right now, a D.R. Horton or a Lennar or whatever, and just buy up, 100 acres, split it up and start building homes. Right. Nobody would buy them because they would have to buy them for cash, regardless of how great of a deal it was.
Totally. I hear you.
But I hope it does. I really do. Bringing costs down of homes.
I don't see it going anywhere. I don't see it. I mean, meaning in the sense that I don't see them getting regulated out of the industry. I only think it's going to advance, and eventually we're all going to be living in 3D printed homes, right?
Well, yeah, even if it doesn't look like this in concrete, right? I mean, this, when you look at this, when you actually, and there's a bunch of videos, just type in 3D printed homes.
Yeah, they're fascinating to watch.
They're great to watch, but you're really laying concrete, which we've done for hundreds of years.
It is nothing new. It's layer manufacturing, right? That's how 3D printers work. One layer of something and then another layer of plastic or whatever.
So it's an automated take on an already existing technology.
Yeah,
right?
So that's why I think getting to the point where you're going to have funding problems, I just don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, because these are existing processes that have been automated, right?
Right.
Concrete homes already exist. Building an entire house out of concrete's already a thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just cost prohibitive because of the labor.
Right.
Because once you kind of solve the labor problem, as this has been solved here, I mean, when you're talking about like stick construction as compared to concrete, I'd rather have the concrete. That's what I would want. I would think that's going to last longer.
You would hope so, but then it gets into the unknown factor. So anyway, I hope it does. I hope it continues, and I hope it gets to that point where they are a viable option in most areas.
But
because
listen,
bringing the cost of building a home down just does everybody favors.
It does. It works for everybody.
Yeah, you still want your home built the way we build them right now. Hey, that option's still available to you.
Totally
but
fine,
it costs X, right? You want this kind of home, it's also available, and it costs Y, and it's cheaper. Giving people a cheaper option that is just as good or close to as good of a product, in my opinion, is very rarely, right, a bad thing.
Yeah, never. There is. I totally get the argument you were making about, hey, we're cutting out all of this labor now, right? Guess what? You still need an electrician to come in there and wire the house. You need a plumber to come in there and plumb the house. We're just cutting out the framing, and we're just cutting out drywall. Okay.
Right.
So, and I don't even know. Maybe you still need the place drywalled after because you still got to frame it and drywall it. You know.
If you want it to look like that,
like a house.
That's the whole look trend that you can't get past. Like, these look like, on the outside and inside for that matter, they look like a bunch of layered concrete, right? A bunch of patties sitting on top of patties on top, right? And then what is the cost of, if you want it to look like brick on the outside, laying brick or something, what is the cost of hanging that sheetrock on the inside? What's the process of hanging that sheetrock to concrete versus wood, right?
Yeah.
Does that increase? So there's a bunch of all these questions that I'm sure has answers to.
Yeah, but somebody's already answered them.
It's not as simple as, it never is as simple as, hey, this is 10%, 90% cheaper, and it's going to be available to everybody next week. It's never that simple, right?
It's never going to be that simple, but I've been somebody who's watched 3D printing and home manufacturing. I've been tracking the trends since the beginning, since I understood what it was. And I am optimistic about its future overall. And these automated processes of manufacturing, like 3D printing and the sense of this house too, I think it's only a benefit to the global consumer. I think it's only a benefit to the people who are out there. And I think it's going to do the exact same thing. Like, we have a situation where 15 years ago, you had to be a wealthy person to carry a smartphone. And now you can walk into Walmart, and for $150, you can get a phone that does almost everything that an iPhone does.
Yep.
Right? You can go get, for $150, $200, you can go buy a company called BLU, Blue Smartphones. And you can go buy a phone at Best Buy, Walmart, and it does most of what a $1,200 iPhone does. Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. The effective capability of an iPhone, and you're paying a tenth the cost. And I don't see that being a bad thing for the end user and the consumer. So.
Right. No, and that's really where this stands. I think you're going to see more of a, like most things, niche marketplaces. Like you said, at-home 3D printers and stuff, there's still a niche market. There are some businesses out there that use them for specialty tools and stuff like that. But, again, when you're a small business, it's not at the level of mass production, right? So you have to be a niche.
So for prototyping, 3D printers are huge now. And there's another interesting business, Jay Leno's Garage, right? Mm-hmm. I love Jay Leno because he's a car guy. I'm a car guy. He has, I don't know how many cars.
It's like an airplane hangar, right? Or something
like
that.
No, it was an airplane hangar. Now it's 4.
Nice.
Yeah. But, he has all these old vintage cars, and I'm not talking like 60s, 70s muscle vintage. I'm talking 1900s, like late 1800s, like the first Mercedes steam car, whatever. Well, he has a 3D printer, and they just scan the old parts when they break, and they have it takes a day or two because they're metal, because they're carving, because they're doing metal carving or whatever. But the point is, they have an automated machine that can just go reproduce parts and stuff like that. And so I don't think, not only is it not going anywhere, I think there is a future where you have they have a 3D printer in your house.
Yeah, no, look, I think this has a future in most industries. I think this now, housing to me is a distant secondary. I think you're going to see 3D. They've talked about it in medicine, right? Not only prosthetics, but things. UK 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure when we talk about machines inside of our bodies, right? We're talking about UK literally for the first time in history, just for human trials, is released a product. It's a mechanical human heart, fully mechanical, valves, everything.
Wow.
It's a machine heart, right? Left ventricle, right ventricle, lower, all of it, right? Machine heart.
Somebody took anatomy.
Hey, there ain't nothing wrong with it. Just approved it for human trials. Now, if those go well, you're talking about, think about that. Let's just say it works for argument's sake. 3D printing, you think wouldn't come into that? Where they just take it and go, hey, we're scanning it inside and out. We're going to build 1 billion of these.
Right. Well, the shout out to Kurzweil, the singularity approaches. That's all I can say.
Hey, wasn't that supposed to be? Is that guy still alive? Uh-huh. Is that the guy that said, "I just need to live until I'm 90 to get to"? Mm-hmm. Right. Whatever. Hey,
I think that's Kurzweil. Yeah.
I don't know about my lifetime, but maybe in my kid's lifetime, there is a future where we can replace just about anything.
Yeah, where we're going to upload our consciousness to a server somewhere.
Well, I don't know about that, but
Amazon Web Services is going to say, your brain no longer conforms to our terms of service.
You are now outdated software, But no, I think in my children's future, like cancer, they won't cure cancer. What they'll do is figure out how, if you have liver cancer, they just take yours out and give you another one.
Yeah,
they don't even have to do it. Why cure cancer when you can just replace the part of your body with cancer's at? You know what I mean? So anyway, that's my point of it. I hope it works out.
This was a fun show. I just want to close out with a pro tip for everybody. Read the subtitles on any TV show for an entire season. It's the same thing as reading a book.
I don't know where you come up with these pro tips, but God help me. I think they make me dumber.
They're from my brain.
Then your brain's an idiot.
So are yours.
See you later, folks.
Bye now.